ไทม์ไลน์สุดที่ชายหยุ่นวันนี้เป็นเรื่องที่ผมเชื่อว่าคนไทยทุกคนสนใจครับเพราะว่าเป็นเรื่องเกี่ยวกับเขาพระวิหารหนังสือเล่มนี้เป็นหนังสือที่ออกใหม่เป็นหนังสือที่คนเขียนบอกว่าน่าที่จะมีข้อมูลครบถ้วนที่สุดเล่มหนึ่งเกี่ยวข้องกับเรื่องเขาพระวิหารโดยเฉพาะกรณีความขัดแย้งระหว่างไทยกับกัมพูชาตั้งแต่ขึ้นศาลโลกครั้งแรกมาจนถึงครั้งหลังนี้และมีเอกสารที่ทางการสหรัฐนี่ปล่อยออกมาหลังจากที่เป็นเอกสารลับทางราชการมายาวนานคุณจอห์นเบอร์เจอร์สคนเขียนคนนี้บอกว่าได้ข้อมูลใหม่หลายเรื่องที่คนไทยคนกัมพูชาหรือคนทั่วโลกที่ติดตามเรื่องเขาพระวิหารอาจจะไม่เคยได้ยินไม่เคยได้เห็นจอห์นเบอร์เจอร์สเป็นนักหนังสือพิมพ์ครับเคยทำงานกับเนชั่นเริ่มต้นใหม่ๆเมื่อ40 กว่าปีก่อน หลังจากนั้นคุณจอห์นเบอร์เจอร์สก็ไปเป็นนักข่าวให้กับ Washington Post และมีความสนใจในเรื่องราวของไทยกัมพูชาอย่างลึกซึ้งหนังสือเล่มนี้เป็นเล่มที่3ที่คุณจอห์นได้เขียนขึ้นมาชื่อ Temple in the Clouds วัดนี้อยู่ในเมฆหมอกที่น่าที่จะค้นหาและค้นคว้าวันนี้ผมจะคุยกับจอห์นเบอร์เจอร์สครับซึ่งมาเมืองไทยเพื่อที่จะมาบอกกล่าวว่าหนังสือเล่มนี้น่าสนใจอย่างไร Hi John, thank you for joining the program today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Why did you decide to write this book in the first place?
Well, I first went to the temple in 1974.
Yes.
And like almost everyone who visits this place, I was enchanted. You're standing there in the presence of great civilization, great religious architecture, and you're at the top of a mountain that has a view for maybe 100 kilometers. So I was enchanted, like most everyone. And I returned in 2010 at a time when the current dispute between Thailand and Cambodia was heating up again.
Right.
And it occurred to me that this was a fabulous subject for a book. I've often been surprised at how little Cambodians and Thais know about each other's history.
That's true, yeah.
And I felt that by writing a book that brought all the facts together as we know them, and writing it in a nice sort of objective tone about this subject that is often very emotional, that maybe that would serve some purpose in
at least the
calming
facts,
down things.
At least you're trying to get the facts right.
That's right.
And are you saying you are quite objective over the issue?
I've tried
not taking sides between Thailand and Cambodia?
I have not taken sides. I try just to put the facts out there.
Well, I see this picture is quite interesting because I think very few people have seen it. This are the team of lawyers on the Cambodian side.
Right.
These are from the Thai side, and Momrachong Seni Pramod.
That's right.
He's the leader of the Thai team. And of course, we all know what happened there. And then, of course, the ICJ verdict in the recent movement has put Thailand in not a very favorable position. And the Thai people still look at Khao Pravihan, or as you say in Cambodia, Khao Priyavihan.
Priyavihan.
Yes. And well, a mixture of feelings, you know, perhaps pride, perhaps anger, perhaps disappointment, but still, you know, trying to come to peace with history. What is the most interesting new things that you have found in this book?
Well, I would say this. The two countries are divided, but the emotion in both countries is driven by the same kind of historical dynamic.
Right.
On the Cambodian side, Cambodia, when they were the Khmer Empire, the civilization that built Angkor, they controlled almost all of mainland Southeast Asia.
Yes.
And then in subsequent centuries, they were compressed down to become the much smaller country of Cambodia.
Right.
By the Thais and by the Vietnamese. And so the Cambodians feel that they really have to watch out for for their territorial integrity, even today. But on the Thai side, 100 years ago, you had the same dynamic. Thailand, that is Siam, had taken its place in Southeast Asia as a major regional power. It felt that this was the natural role that it played in the region. And then a big country comes along and starts compressing Thailand. That is France, the French colonial power.
Yeah.
So on both sides of the border, you have this similar dynamic in play. I thought that was quite interesting.
Strong feelings on both sides.
Yeah. I would say in Cambodia, stronger, in that everybody in Cambodia knows about this temple
Yes.
and cares about it
Yes.
and wants to defend it.
Yes.
And on the Thai side, a lot of people know, but the emotions are not so strong. There are many people who don't really have an opinion one way or another as to what should happen to this temple.
So what is the conclusion of your book on this issue?
The conclusion of the book, that's a tough one.
Do you have a conclusion?
Well, my conclusion, my hope,
Yes.
is that we are now in a position where going forward we can look for some kind of long-term settlement. You know, this is a very tragic outcome, that this place that is a great symbol of human civilization has become a conflict zone. If you go there now, there are paramilitary police from both sides. There's barbed wire. There's no passage. It's a conflict zone, and you know that's wrong for a place like this. And we are in a position now where there's been peace at the temple for 4 years.
Yes.
The two governments are getting more friendly.
Yes.
There's more cooperation going on between Phnom Penh and Bangkok. There is no overt tension over this issue, but it's still such a hot potato that essentially the issue has been put on hold.
Right.
But going forward, there have been a number of proposals on solving this problem. One of them is joint history textbooks,
Right.
in which Thais and Cambodians would grow up knowing something about their common history. I think they tend to see themselves as very separate. Outsiders tend to see the similarities between the two cultures.
Do you think there are more similarities than differences?
I think there are a lot of similarities. There are obviously linguistic similarities.
Sure.
Both languages are very heavily influenced by Sanskrit.
Yes.
Thai Wats and Thai and Cambodian Wats look essentially the same.
Yep.
Both countries are sort of Hindu-influenced civilizations. And it's a shame that the differences are the things that are emphasized.
If you put the academics from Thai and Cambodian sides together, you think they will be able to agree on a common textbook on Khao Phavihan?
I think it would take a lot of negotiation.
Yes.
But maybe they can read this book here.
Right.
And I think this book lays out the real true history of the place to the extent I've been able to verify and document it. And starting from ancient times, going all the way forward to present
The
times.
version that you have here, would it offend both sides or would it please both sides?
Well, I think there's something for both sides.
Okay, something for both sides?
Something for both sides that they would that
You
they
have
would like
access to the declassified information.
Yes.
From the American side.
Yes.
What are some of the new things that you have found?
Well, the cable traffic, the memos that the U.S. embassies in Phnom Penh and Bangkok were writing back to Washington were declassified recently, and you can go into the U.S. National Archives in Washington, outside Washington, and read them. And they show how the U.S. was trying to mediate. The U.S. did not want this dispute to boil over, this dispute between Cambodia and Thailand. They viewed it as a distraction. They wanted to have peace between Thailand and Cambodia they hoped that Sihanouk, Prince Sihanouk, who was the leader of Cambodia at the time, would be friendly and would cooperate in the larger U.S. objectives in Indochina.
At that time, what was happening in China?
Well, the U.S. Vietnam was divided into North and South, and the U.S. role in the South was getting bigger and bigger with advisors and military aid.
The Vietnam War was starting.
It was starting. It was still low level.
So the Americans didn't want any trouble between Thailand and Cambodia.
That's right. And there were also constant crises and conflicts in Laos between communist, neutral, and pro-Western factions.
Sure.
So the American side wanted Thailand and Cambodia to be friendly.
Yes.
And so the Americans were trying to arrange what they called press truces.
Press truces.
In which the media, the newspapers and radio in Thailand and Cambodia would agree not to attack and insult the other side, which would hopefully allow there to be some kind of reconciliation
would have been
between the
difficult
two countries.
because both sides, the media on both sides were quite aggressive.
That's right.
About the issue.
Ultimately, it was not successful.
No.
And ultimately, the Thai side was occupying the temple at the time and saying that it was Thai territory. And in 1959, the Cambodians brought a suit in the ICJ, asking the ICJ to declare that this was, in fact, Cambodian territory. So it's interesting that the two embassies at the time took the positions of their host governments.
Really?
When
the American embassy in Bangkok took the Thai side?
Well, it
the
took
American
the Thai side.
Embassy in Phnom Penh took the Cambodian side.
That's right, and I'll tell you how. The Thais did not want this case to go to the ICJ.
No, right.
They wanted to set it bilaterally.
Right.
The Cambodians did want it.
Yes.
The embassy in Bangkok, the American embassy in Bangkok, sent a cable to Washington saying, we think an ICJ case would just escalate a relatively minor dispute into a major international conflict.
Okay.
And the Cambodian, the U.S. embassy in Phnom Penh, cables to Washington saying, we think that an ICJ case would put the issue on hold for a while and then give diplomatic cover to whichever side loses. You know, whichever side loses would have to say we can't. It's out of our hands. We have to obey the court's decision.
Face saving.
Face saving. Yes. So both embassies were reflecting the view of the local government,
which is what diplomats should do, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But Dean Acheson was also quite a figure, an American on the Cambodian side of the panel of lawyers.
That's right. Dean Acheson had been Secretary of State from 1949 to 53, and then became a private lawyer again. And in 1960, I believe, was hired by the Cambodians to represent them at the ICJ. And this made the Thai government furious. In that they
That's
believed,
him, right? That's him in the picture,
that's
right?
him
Very
right
prominent
there in the
figure
middle.
there,
yes, Yes. The Thai government was convinced that this reflected American support for the Cambodian side of the case. And in Washington, the U.S. kept saying Mr. Acheson's presence on the Cambodian team in no way signifies a U.S. support for the Cambodian side. He's a private lawyer. He can represent whoever he wants.
But the Thai side wasn't convinced.
The Thai side was not convinced. But indeed, in this profession, lawyers often represent the other side. So Dean Acheson's very first case, he represented Norway against the United States.
He did?
Yeah. That was in the 1920s. So international law was his specialty.
So he didn't feel that he was coming under pressure from his own government, or that he might risk being misunderstood by the Thai side?
Well, he actually, before he accepted, he went to his U.S. government and said, would it cause any problems with the U.S. government if I accept this? And apparently they said no. So he he accepted. And I believe that the U.S. government was, in fact, trying to be neutral, and they just wanted this dispute to go away.
In the book, who do you blame for the original cause of the conflict? Because a lot of Thais would say the French left behind this legacy, and this is why we had this problem. If the French had not done this, then we would have been saved.
Well, I see it goes back further than the French.
Really?
Yes. To what I mentioned earlier, that Cambodia used to be a huge
That's right.
empire that controlled large portions of Thailand. If you go around northeast Thailand, you go to Lopburi, you see Khmer temples left from this period. And then over the centuries, Siam appeared on the scene and began expanding and shrinking Cambodia. And the Cambodians see this temple as the sort of present-day flashpoint of that conflict. That they believe that this is the place where we have to defend against Thailand. And many Cambodians believe, I think incorrectly, that the Thai government wants to take this temple again. And I see no evidence of that.
No.
That the Thai government accepts the ICJ decision of 1962, and the current dispute is about the land around the temple. But you're right, the Thai position is that in the late 19th century, the French came along and bullied Thailand and forced Thailand to give up land that had been in its possession for decades and in some cases centuries in Laos and Cambodia. And this was basically unfair. As you know, in 1941, Siam invaded and took back the 3 provinces of Western Cambodia. But in the ICJ case, the Thai side was convinced that that this was a French border, and this was a lot of their argument. Said that the famous 1907 map that was the key piece of evidence in the case.
The map.
That it was a French map, and represented French colonial notions of where the border should be, and therefore it was illegitimate.
And do you agree with that theory?
Well, this was a map that was, it's a long entangled history, but early in the 20th century, France forced Thailand to give back various parts of Cambodia and Laos. And a treaty was signed in 1904 saying that the border would be the watershed line of the Dangrek Mountains. There was a joint border commission that surveyed the border. And after that work, with Siamese acceptance, the French drafted a map. The idea was that the French were more advanced in cartography techniques. So the French drafted the map and then presented copies of this map to Thailand as the official work of the Border Commission. And Thailand accepted these maps. And the map showed Previhir as being just on the Thai side, on the Cambodian side of the border. just literally a few hundred meters only. And for a long time, nobody paid much attention to this. But eventually, the ICJ's decision hinged on that map.
So the map was the one that decided.
The map was the key piece of evidence.
But what about the Thai argument?
The Thai argument was that the map was illegitimate and wrong. Because the line was supposed to be the watershed line. And Previhir clearly was on the the north side of the watershed, which
right.
would place it in Thailand.
Thai side, yes.
In the Thai side.
Yes.
And that the treaty should be more important than a map. The treaty is the governing document.
Right.
Eventually, the ICJ said it doesn't matter where the watershed line is. What matters is that Thailand was given this map
And
in 1907 and then was silent.
No objection.
No
from the Thai
objection.
side?
No objection from the Thai side. In the 1920s and 30s, treaties of friendship were negotiated, and Thailand did not bring up this issue. There is no sort of diplomatic paper trail of the Thais objecting to this. And so ultimately the ICJ said, you, Thailand, accepted, in effect, you accepted this map by remaining silent, by not speaking up earlier. And you cannot come along 50 years later and say, we don't accept.
So 50 years later, we went to the court again and we argue on the same ground, right? But the court said, no. We stick to the original verdict.
Well, in 2011, after this shooting war between Thailand and Cambodia, the Cambodian side went back to the court and said, we want a clarification of the 1962 decision. The 1962 decision did not set the border. It said, all it said was that Preah Temple and its vicinity.
Vicinity, that's the word.
Yes, that's
the key word, vicinity. Yeah. What is vicinity, right?
What is vicinity? The court did not define vicinity. In 1962, in giving the temple back to Thailand,
to Cambodia.
Excuse me, you're right. In giving the temple back to Cambodia, the Thai cabinet came up with a decision of vicinity. And it was essentially a line around the temple, the footprint of the temple, and a few hundred meters of land on either side. They said, we are defining vicinity to mean this. And they put up a fence around it.
Right. Which is opposed by the Cambodian.
Well, at that time, the Cambodians did not really object. They were so happy to get the temple back that Sihanouk himself was quoted as saying, well, it's just a few meters of territory, who cares?
Yeah, right.
We have the temple, and that was what was important. But 50 years later, again, this question of what does vicinity mean became very important because the Cambodians applied for World Heritage status for this temple, and they submitted documents and maps to UNESCO. And to be a World Heritage site, you have to draft this very complicated plan for how you're going to keep up, and you have to establish buffer zones around the temple, around the site. And Thailand objected because they felt that some of the buffer zones was intruding into area outside of what Thailand had defined as vicinity.
Right.
So this started some diplomatic tension, which created military buildup, and eventually, days and days of exchanging fire and dozens of people killed. It was a very tragic thing.
Yeah.
So Cambodia went back to the court and said, we want the court to, essentially they said, we want the court to say that vicinity means everything south of the line shown on the 1907 map.
Right.
This is my simplification of what the Cambodians wanted. And so there was another series of hearings and pleadings and arguments. And the court came back in 2013 and said, we will not declare that the 1907 line is the correct border. This case is not about where does the border lie. It is about ownership of this temple. What we will do is define vicinity.
Okay.
And so we, the court, define vicinity to mean the entire promontory, the geographical structure on which Preah Vihear Temple sits. And this is a larger area
than
what was defined by Thailand in 1962 as meaning vicinity. And the court defined this cliff line as the south, east, and west lines, but it said on the north, Thailand and Cambodia must sit down together and in good faith decide exactly where is the line. The court gave some guidelines for where the line is, but they're basically telling the two countries to sit down
and work it out.
That was 18 months ago, and Thailand's position since then has been, we will talk with Cambodia, we will abide by the decision of the court, but not just yet.
No, we are too busy with other things.
We're too busy with other things, the change of government.
There was a coup.
And so far, to my knowledge, there have been no discussions between Thailand and Cambodia about where are we going to fix this northern line of defining the vicinity of Preah Vihear Temple.
So the prevailing politics has a lot to do with whether there will be progress from now on. If two governments seem to be on friendly terms now, that issue is sort of suspended for a while.
Yes. Basically, things are getting better between the two countries, but again, this issue is on hold, as you say.
That's right.
And it's still impossible to cross from the Thai side to the temple.
Cannot.
There's a little footbridge across the stream, and it's blocked by barbed wire, and it has been that way since 2008. And there's been no real discussion about when to reopen and sort of normalize relations, because part of the site of the ancient site of Preah Vihear is on the north side. The Barai, or holy reservoir that almost all Khmer temples have, is on the Thai side. And there are a couple of smaller structures, very, very, very small structures, twin little small towers that are on the Thai side. And so from an archaeological point of view, there ought to be access.
Sure.
But instead, there is this line of barbed wire between the two sides.
From the latest decision of the World Court, do you sense that the World Court was trying to tell the two countries to work jointly for all purposes so that both sides can make use of this historical place?
Yes. The World Court's first move was to tell the two sides to form a demilitarized zone at the temple.
Right.
And that led to the withdrawal of the actual army troops that both sides had.
Yes.
But the court clearly wants a long-term solution to this problem.
Which has not been produced.
What has not been produced yet.
No.
And so by trying to clarify the 1962 decision, they're hoping to create a solution that both sides will accept and move forward to have normal relations.
So in your opinion, going forward, apart from what you suggested, a common history book, what else can both countries do?
Well, they have to start talking about what's going on. Right now, there is zero dialogue. There is peace, but
no progress.
There's no progress. So we have to get to a point where the two sides are talking about how do we remove the barbed wire and make this place a normal place on our mutual border.
What about a joint venture to allow tourists to cross the border easily from both sides? Is that possible?
Well, several times in the past we've had exactly that.
Yes, but that is not a formal agreement. It was just local understanding, I think.
Well, there have been several agreements that in many cases, in some cases, were actually national, the national governments deciding that we will have joint access and joint development of this place. It's very important to the Cambodians that everyone recognize that sovereignty remains with them.
Right.
They will not agree to anything which suggests that the sovereignty of this place is somehow unclear or neutral.
Or can be shared by
Can be
anyone
shared.
else,
No,
they would not share sovereignty.
They will not share sovereignty. That has been their position for
That's what the
many
Thais have been
years.
suggesting.
Well,
Although not outright, but saying that, well, we have this joint development and perhaps we can say both countries own the place, which is something that the Cambodians would never.
Well, I think the Thai government has been pretty consistent that we recognize Cambodian sovereignty over this issue. We may not be happy about it,
Yes, yes.
but the ICJ decision in 1962 was very clear that this is Cambodian soil. But the access to the temple is easier from the Thai side, and throughout the years, off and on, as the security situation allowed, there has been a tourist trade from the Thai side to the Cambodian side. And for many years, the only access, easy access, was from the Thai side. So there were agreements between the two governments about how tourists would cross over from Thailand and how long they could stay and the sharing of revenues that the tourists would pay to go across. There have been many agreements like that that are put in place and then something makes them fall apart. But that would be some kind of a normal situation in which the border was open on the Thai side and tourists could cross.
You based your book mainly on documents. You didn't interview people.
I did a few interviews with present-day people, but for the past, it's mostly based on these State Department cables that you mentioned, and also the case history of the ICJ court case. That case generated thousands and thousands of pages of testimonies and affidavits
and you went through all of them.
Well, I did my best. It was thousands and thousands of pages to read. And I also found, some documents that hadn't come out. The Thai side was represented by a lawyer named Philip Jessup.
Yes.
And he was the Thai side's lead lawyer, and then in the middle of the case, he was an American. In the middle of the case, the United States nominates him to be a judge on the ICJ.
I see.
So he has to resign from the
representing Thailand.
Yeah, he has to resign from representing Thailand and recuse himself from hearing the case. So he was sworn in as a judge and then immediately had to leave.
But didn't preside over this case, though.
Yes, he had nothing to do with this case. But his personal papers are in the Library of Congress in the United States. So
on this case?
On this case. So there was a lot of interesting information there.
So you think that the future of Khao Phraya must be a joint development effort?
Well, that word is explosive, joint development.
Really?
Well, it's...
Because we have joint development projects with Malaysia, on the oil story.
Anytime you have a site that's right on the border, where both sides should be able to access, the two countries typically, whether Thailand or Cambodia, they have some kind of understanding, some kind of agreement about access from the two sides. But the Cambodian position has always been that we cannot have any joint development that means in any way that our sovereignty over this site is compromised. But in the past, the two sides have been able to cooperate and have
without using
agreements.
that word.
Without using that word. But certainly Cambodia, it has a lot of experience with preserving and curating places like Previhira, and
Sure.
it knows what it's doing. But it's a very unnatural situation.
When you go up there now, you see
yes.
that this is not natural.
Not in any way. The Cambodians have built a very steep road up the mountainside, and approximately 100,000 tourists, mostly Cambodians, are visiting every year from the Cambodian side. But right now, 0 tourists are visiting from the Thai side.
Because of the tension.
Because of the tension, and there's literally no way that barbed wire is there.
Yes.
There's a physical blocking, and there's no understanding between the two governments about if people cross from Thailand, how long can they stay, what are the visa or lack of visa requirements, or this kind of thing.
So why should Thai people and Cambodian people read the book?
Well, I think this is a very emotional issue, and what I've tried to do is bring as many facts as possible to the argument and put them in one place. And everybody has heard of this temple, but I think there's a lot of new information in this book that sort of brings alive this very long and very tragic dispute that should be settled in some way.
And it will continue to be an issue if it's not settled in some way.
If it's not settled. At present, the Cambodians are choosing to be patient. They're not pressing the Thais to say the ICJ has issued this ruling. We need to have some discussion. They're just letting it go, and from their point of view, there is access to the temple. 100,000 people per year are going, so it's not a big priority to them.
Now, Thai side is not pushing it either.
No, there's silence.
Yeah, on both sides.
Yes, silence on both sides, and both sides are content at this point to let that situation go on.
That's a real press truce now.
Yes.
The media on both sides are not attacking each other.
Are not attacking and insulting the other side. That's right.
นี่เป็นข้อมูลใหม่ที่จอห์นบอกครับว่าน่าสนใจมากเพราะว่าคนไทยคนกัมพูชาหรือคนทั่วโลกที่รู้จักเขาพระวิหารเนี่ยควรจะอ่านเพราะว่าเป็นข้อมูลที่น่าจะทำให้ข้อสงสัยหรือความไม่แน่ชัดบางประการเนี่ยมีความกระจ่างแจ้งมากยิ่งขึ้นแน่นอนหนังสือเล่มนี้จะไม่สรุปว่าใครถูกใครผิดแต่ว่าจะเอาข้อเท็จจริงประวัติศาสตร์ข้อเท็จจริงล่าสุดและข้อมูลที่ได้จากแฟ้มที่เคยเป็นราชการลับของกระทรวงต่างประเทศสหรัฐนั้นมาเปิดเผยและมาอธิบายถึงกรณีเขาพระวิหารน่าสนใจครับและผมก็เชื่อว่าท่านที่ต้องการที่จะรู้ว่าถ้าเรานั่งห่างออกไปจากความรู้สึกของความเป็นคนไทยหรือกัมพูชาและอยากจะรู้จริงๆว่ามองอย่างเป็นธรรมมองอย่างเป็นกลางมองอย่างเอาข้อเท็จจริงมาพิจารณานั้นจะเป็นอย่างไรกันแน่หนังสือเล่มนี้บอกว่าจะทำหน้าที่เช่นนั้นครับ Thank you, John, for being with us, and I'm sure it would create a lot of interest in Thailand, and I hope in Cambodia and around the world. People who know Cambodia, know Khao Phra Vihan, and know Thailand would certainly be interested in all the new information you have managed to get for them.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Okay, ครับ
Okay. Well, thank you very much.